Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of the Ilongga Yogi podcast. I'm Kate, a certified yoga instructor and yoga studio owner, and I talk about yoga, mindfulness, fitness, mental health, and wellness. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about my bipolar 2 disorder and how I have recovered. But before we begin, let's take a few moments to settle down. So if you have the space to do so, come into any comfortable position, rest your hands, relax your shoulders, and join me in a moment of stillness. You can close your eyes if you're in a safe space, although if you are driving, then do not close your eyes. And wherever you are, let's just take 3 deep breaths together. So everyone, inhale and sigh it out. And again, inhale and let it go. One more inhale and exhale. Slowly start to move your fingers and your toes. Start to roll your neck gently and begin to open your eyes. Namaste. So as I've mentioned earlier, today's podcast will be more of a story time. So if you'd like to stick around and listen to my story on mental health, bipolar 2 disorder, and how I was able to rise above that, then you can stay here and listen along. So I will be tackling topics on mental illness, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and suicide. So if this episode might be triggering for some of you, please proceed with caution. So let's start. My story begins when I was 15 years old. I was diagnosed with clinical depression, and so I took antidepressants right away during that time. In my head, throughout that whole year of taking medication, I really didn't understand what was going on. And so my family took the lead and I just followed along with them, not really knowing how big of a deal this actually was. And since I'm part of a Filipino household, mental illness is very taboo, and as much as possible, my diagnosis needed to be hidden and never spoken of outside. When I took my medication, I gained so much weight. I did not know at the time that that was the side effect, so I was very ashamed and I blamed myself. Until now, it's kind of painful to remember and even talk about. And I know it kind of sounds stupid that me gaining weight was traumatizing, but it's real. And if you have ever experienced something like this, then you probably understand. It birthed so many more anxieties and insecurities to the point of me depriving myself of nutrition because I felt fat. I tell you, I hated my body so much, but I was so skinny. I was very, very thin and unhealthy. And so even though I was off meds for a year, I did feel less depressed, but I knew I was not healed completely. The symptoms were gone, which is what it's supposed to do, but the issues of like childhood trauma, the anxieties, all the root causes were still very much alive. So I went through like several more years unmedicated and unaware of my condition. I continued to restrict myself because even though I was very thin already, I still felt very fat. I didn't see it and I could not understand why people said I was thin, but I still felt fat. And so I numbed myself with alcohol too. This was already in college, so this was like a few years after I was diagnosed and after taking medication. And then I fell into bad relationships that seemed happy but were actually toxic. I pushed people away, I pushed friends and family away. And I even considered suicide so many times I can't even count anymore. I started to notice, even a few years after that as well, that my depression was becoming present again. At that time, it felt like I was burning out every other week. And during this time, I was already done with college. I already graduated. I was working in Manila. And I noticed that it has started to affect my work, my relationships, my friendships again, my family most especially. I just felt very disconnected from my friends and family, from my loved ones. And so that did not help at all. This cycle, it became very exhausting until I decided to reach out for professional help. I couldn't understand why I was going through this so frequently, and I would just blame it on myself during this time, and that blaming on myself made me feel even worse. Like it didn't help me at all. And so this cycle going on for a year, I think. And then that was when I was diagnosed in 2017 with bipolar 2. And at that moment, as my doctors, because I reached out to a couple of doctors, they kind of explained to me what it was, and everything just made sense. And at that time, that's when I decided that I was going to drop everything. I kind of took a break from work and left Manila and decided to go back home to my hometown, which is Iloilo City, to recover here for a while. And it was quite perfect because at that time it was nearing the Christmas season. So at least I kind of had an excuse to really go home. Because of my experience with medication, I really didn't want to do it this time. So usually when you are diagnosed with bipolar disorder, doctors really push for medication. But because of what I went through, I was not ready for that at all. So I knew I was going to take a more challenging path because, with meds, it just makes things a little easier. But without it, you just have to go through the ups and downs, like the natural ups and downs. So I still wanted to go with that because I knew that in the long run, it would probably lead me to a better place. What I did do was rely on my yoga and meditation practice. My yoga practice and my meditation practice, I tell you, is like my life and my blood now. Every morning I would meditate and I would roll out my mat and sweat it out in a yoga class, even though I was just practicing on my own at home. I created a routine for me that took care of my body, mind, and heart. And I worked on fixing my relationships with friends, with family, even though it was hard at times. I kept those bonds very strong, even though I was a bit farther away now since I was in Iloilo and all my friends were in Manila, most of them. I took time to learn, to try new things, to step out of my comfort zone during this time, and I spent more time in nature as well. Plus, the most important part is that I journaled every single day. And I know that journaling is something that we hear a lot, but we think that it's unnecessary. But I tell you, it is very effective and it has been a very helpful tool for me. Doing these repeatedly every day changed my life. And what was nice is that most of the things that were part of my routine that kind of helped take care of myself aren't things that you need to spend on so much. You can find these things like either online, just on YouTube, through apps, or it's something that you can just do at home, like a nice activity that you can do at home that you can DIY, or just like step out of your house, take a walk or something. So these are things that are accessible to most of us. And during this time, I didn't have work. And although I'm going to be honest, I am a little bit more privileged than most people are, and I am aware of that, but I still didn't have money coming in. So I needed to find ways to not spend too much, but to still be able to take care of myself. Now, as I mentioned, the only thing that I did spend on was therapy. And I chose to go with a therapist, meaning kind of more like a counselor, instead of going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, because I know that those are very pricey. And so I didn't want to spend too much money. So instead, I was lucky enough to find friends who I can pay for at a very low price because they're not, doctors or anything, but they've had pretty much the same education, and they kind of really helped me a lot. They, even though they're not doctors, but they were very, very helpful in my own recovery. So I would meet with my therapist twice a month, and that was really helpful to process all the pain, all the trauma, all the things that are pretty ugly and not fun to process. Plus, I also manifested the life that I wanted because I knew that my life at that point wasn't the best and I was really struggling. And so I just kept manifesting like what I hope my life could turn out to be once I was able to fight and battle this bipolar 2 disorder. A year later, I opened up my yoga studio. And so I guess that you could say that I manifested that. And I was very, very happy. My studio is called Body Love Yoga Studio, and it's like my baby. And I'm so, so proud of it because it has changed me so much. My studio became the reason why I wanted to recover. It's like it was my inspiration. I needed to heal. I needed to forgive my past, to let go. And I learned how to love myself unconditionally so that I could love my new community the same way. So I really worked on healing myself so that I could serve my community better. But the journey isn't perfect, especially this year. I thought I was completely done with bipolar 2, which is kind of funny now when I look back and think about that because, bipolar 2 is just a part of my life, and maybe there will come a day when I can say that I am completely free of that mental illness, but maybe that's never going to happen either. And instead of trying to fight it, instead of trying to hate myself for it, I have to embrace it. And so this year I did relapse, especially because of the pandemic. I think it threw all of us off a little bit. And it kind of felt like I was starting over again. So it was hard. But the past few weeks, I have slowly learned to accept that this is just a part of my life for now and that it's okay. And now I know that even though I'm starting over again, sort of, I'm a lot stronger, I'm a lot braver, I'm a lot wiser than I was when this all first started. And so I know that I can beat this. There are times, when I feel hurt. That's the truth. I feel sad sometimes because I wish I could just function like a normal person. I mean, I wish that I didn't have this. Like, I wish things were different. And I wish that the treatment for bipolar 2, at least where I'm from here in the Philippines, actually really did make me better and didn't create like another mental illness like what happened to me before. Because that was very scary for me. And that's the only reason why I don't want to take the medication. I don't want to feel so anxious about the food I eat. I want to enjoy the food I eat and I want to enjoy my life, but it's hard. It's tricky, In the end, it's because of this illness that I've learned to become unforgivingly compassionate to everyone around me. It's because of this illness that I can empathize with so many people. And it's because of this illness that I found yoga and meditation, and that has saved my life. I mean, it's what I do now. Most importantly, it's because of my experience that this has motivated me to speak up about it more, to share my story, to bring awareness to mental health, to help other people, because I know that so many people are suffering in the dark, and I've made it my life purpose now to help them in this little way that I can, whether it's through my yoga classes or through guided meditations or through this podcast, through my videos on YouTube, through my mental health circles that I hold through the studio. It's all very cathartic for me too, knowing that I'm able to help someone. It helps me too. I'll end this episode with my favorite poem, and if you've heard me speak in public before, then you most likely know this already, but here goes. If you were born with a weakness to fall, you were born with a strength to rise, by Rupi Kaur. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I'll catch you next time.